Welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here. Today we're going over the Psaro character review. The brand new Fire unit, finally, released a global as part of the Dragon Quest collaboration. So getting into things, the character review today is going to be the character overview, the base and total stat analysis, a couple other metrics about the crit hit and avoidance, accuracy, evasion, all leading up to the report card, where I kind of summarize these stats in the context of the character overall. I do have a special reaction to a video from another content creator that I want to take like 5 minutes to go over when I compare my grade to theirs. And I promise this is not any shots fired. It's one of my favorite content creators. This comes from a place of love. I was just shocked when I saw it, so I had to actually respond to this in my own way here. But then we're going to go to the class and job overview, the TMR review, my general thoughts in a nutshell, and then I'm going to look at the job-based vision cards eligibility, kind of a new thing I want to do for some of these characters here, the Esper Synergies, and then weapon optimization. So kicking things off, brand new Fire unit as we talked about. They've given him the Master of Monster Kind unique main job with the Samurai and Trick Lancers as the subjobs. He equips swords, hats, cloths, and accessory with a move of 3 and a jump of 2. So some extra mobility there as a 90 cost unit, and a very special asterisk. He's not a human. They've given him a unique species, so for many of these Espers that have man-killer nodes in them, they will not apply to him as a character, and that can be relatively strong when you talk about reducing the amount of damage that you're taking. Now, if we're looking at the resistances overall here, relatively strong in my opinion. His only weakness is the 10% to pierce. Strongest is the 15% to missile, 10 positive to slash and strike, with the 5% to magic, so really well-rounded overall. From an ailment perspective, he is not a 97 faith unit, so you don't have to worry terribly about these, but 50% to sleep, 50% to immobilize, and 10% to paralyze. Now, as we get into the base stat analysis, from an HP perspective, he actually does skew a little on the higher side for a damage dealer, particularly for an evade unit. That's one of the biggest things that I want people to keep in mind when they think about its health pool here. For most evade units, they are very low in terms of HP, and they use other means of survivability, aka either their evasion or things like courage and re-raise in order to add to their survivability. He definitely skews higher on the HP side of things. Now, from an attack perspective, just a tier lower from many of the normal attack damage dealers. So without some strong penetrations, you will notice it, but he does have a very great mechanic on one of his buffs where he can increase his overall damage output by 20%. We'll talk about that more soon, but overall, definitely a step down on the attack stat compared to many of the more recent physical damage dealers that we've seen. Now, agility-wise, extremely fast base agility here at 63. That does come in handy with the self-buffs and the vision card buffs and how that ends up rounding up. Overall, the base agility is an astounding spot. The dexterity, a little bit above average, nothing too crazy though. And then luck, very high above average. He is among, we'll say, top 10% in the game, which makes sense considering what he is as an evade unit. So as we transition those stats from individual graphs to this kind of summarized graph here, his relative strengths are obviously on the agility side of things as well as the attack and luck. When you talk about the mastery ability, the board and the board nodes, a couple shifts here, but honestly not a ton. He actually does have above average attack stat on the board. The agility, they don't penalize him that much on the board to bring him down to any kind of, we'll say, average level. The dexterity may be a step down on what they've given him, but luck stays relatively the same. And if we're examining this, the board stats, 111 attack stat is more than what they give many characters, so he does get a little bump there. The 5 agility on the board is on the lower side of things, but because his base agility is so good, he doesn't actually end up taking that big of a drop. And 79 luck is significant enough that it keeps him consistent with many of the others, so he does end up on the higher side of the luck things. Now, for the crit and crit avoidance, as we saw, he takes a step down on the dexterity side of things, so that critical hit rate does end up being relatively average. It's not necessarily anything to worry about. The crit avoid rate, which does scale entirely off your luck, actually still ends up on a very high side of things. Really not surprising from that perspective. That's also a big piece of his survivability where you take less critical hits overall. Now, from an accuracy perspective, if we're looking at total innate accuracy without any passives equipped, which is this blue line, he is a top 10 most accurate unit. And he does have a passive that can give him an extra 25 accuracy when you do, it bumps him up to where this triangle is here up top. Now, if you don't have that equipped, his accuracy ends up to where you're seeing my cursor on the screen at the moment. So relatively average overall, but when you consider that you're giving him a lot of luck scaling things, his accuracy does not end up suffering at all. So overall, definitely an accurate unit. And then evasion, boy, there's a lot of things to talk about with the evasion here. So this chart that we're seeing is your evasion with luck scaling equipment, meaning luck truststone set bonuses, double vision cards, luck truststone passives, etc., etc. He's got a couple different varieties of evasion that actually do skew significantly depending upon what you use. So he's got one passive here that increases his evasion rate by 12%, and if you only have this passive on and not the other one, his evasion does still end up at the higher side of things, but you can make the case that it's like on that B tier of evasion. Now, there's a second passive here where if you were to omit that first one, but only have this one equipped, well, that 12% agility is this bottom triangle here for non-missile and magical attacks. So if it's a slash, pierce, or strike, he is this bottom red triangle, but if it's missile or magic, he is this top triangle. So very strong against those types. And then finally, if you were to combine the two of them, is where these purple triangles end up. So if you were to combine the two of them against slash, pierce, and strike, he still ends up being on the relative higher side of evade, but there are certainly units that have a couple more percentage points than him. But against missile and magic, he gets way above everyone else that's currently in the game. So a lot of different versions of evasion. I just wanted to make sure to point this out. And obviously we're not including buffs at this point or anything like that as well. Now it brings us finally to the report card. So effective HP and physical and magical HP. I'm going C+ overall. Again, his resists are relatively consistent. He's got great HP for an evade unit, no innate defense or spirit or ways to boost it. One of his passives actually decreases his defense. Something to keep in mind there. He is courage capable though, so overall his survivability ends up being okay. From the primary stat perspective, I am going A- here. He's a great attack for an evade unit, and he does have a 20% damage up buff on his courage, which actually is a relatively large increase in damage output. So the primary stat perspective, base attack isn't great, but overall damage output with his penetrations that he has access to ends up being pretty decent. Agility A+. He is among the fastest in the game. High base agility, that is just going to scale off a bunch of great things. Definitely one of the fastest, so A+ on this metric. Accuracy, I'm also going A. As a high luck unit, they have good accuracy. You may not have the passive on that gives you the 25 accuracy, but he also does have an ability that's a plus 30% hit chance, so he does do relatively well in that regard. Now, evasion, I also am going an A here. Great evade potential, one of the better in the game. And just for context, he is equal or better to Elena as your benchmark for evasion in the game. Now, movement, I am going B. The jump 2 is great, but no other types of movement altering passives or buffs. Passives, I am going an A. Now, great passives for a variety of builds, and Gumi actually got very creative with what they've done here for some of his penetration potential. For counter abilities, I'm also going an A here. An exceptional counter to increase his damage output or his evasion if you wanted to, but I do think the first one is by far the better of the two. The overall kit, I'm going with an A. He's got just enough utility, enough damage, enough raw stats, and reliability to be effective at what he wants to do for a final grade of an A. Now, I reserve these A tiers for characters that I do think are potentially meta-defining, and Psaro absolutely falls into that category, which leads me to something that I don't normally do here as a follow-up to my grade. I'm going to be doing a reaction to a content creator who's just a fan of the channel, who I personally love. I think he's one of the best, if not the best, content creator out there for what he does for his videos in terms of presentation, the uniqueness of thought that he puts into how he wants to convey his bullet points, how concise he is. I promise there's no love lost in me doing this. This is not a criticism or a critique, just an utter disagreement.
Time for the
Mysidia Gaming. So Mysidia does these excellent videos, essentially boiled down to should you pull for a unit? And he gives great contextual evidence for why. I think he's one of the best content creators for speaking to like a wide audience, both top level and mid game in terms of competitiveness for fans. But I just want to live react to some of the thoughts here in his verdict on whether should you pull. So, without further ado.
Should you pull verdict? And my answer is no. I think that pretty much every player should skip Psaro for the same reason that you should skip Zoma.
My jaw dropped when I heard that he said every player should basically skip for the same reason of him for Soma. Soma is a completely different case, definitely not even in the same tier in my opinion. I'm going to listen to some of the reasons here, comment live on some of my rebuttals on them.
Because these units are just not going to stand the test of time for the most part, especially with the Dream upgrades coming and Fire.
There's some truth to that for many units, where obviously, similar to the second year anniversary where we got the 120 power creep, many of the units that didn't get their 120 or EX upgrades or ME upgrades for a while were a power creep, and that is somewhat true for the reincarnation system. That being said, Psaro is not one of those characters. From everything we've seen so far, just looking ahead from the JP side of things, he does still fit in perfectly with what they do with Yuffie, who is a 140 character, and much of what the fire element ends up doing. Psaro, although he may not be the key cog unit, he is still an important cog in many of the builds. Keep on going for the moment.
It's a pretty tricky element to use. I think
I also, just a small thing, disagree on that fire being a tricky element to use. Most of the fire units at this point have been out forever. That's the old meme that we haven't gotten fire stuff in a while, because basically at this point, most people should have pulled units this time or acquired shards or gotten the vision cards and most of their vision cards are rather old. One of the most important fire vision cards is coming out literally this next week with the Psaro vision card. The other one just got reran last week with the Death Machine vision card, which fires AoE resistance and crit evasion, or at least Brachiosaur as well. And Secrets to the Heart is one of the oldest vision cards in the game. Like, those in a nutshell are essentially all you need to run fire. So I'll keep going.
There is a section of people that should pull for him, or could pull for him, sorry, and that would be super dedicated fire players like myself. So I'm definitely going to be pulling for him.
Slightly disagree here, where many of the comps that I've seen looking ahead on JP's side of things are the dual element comps here, where Psaro does very well with wind, believe it or not, with the Dark Tetrasulfide card, that even if you aren't 100% invested in fire, he actually does relatively well in some of these dual element comps.
But I don't think that non-fire players, stay away. It's a whole investment to get into fire evasion.
I don't know if it's a whole investment. I kind of disagree on that, where it's Psaro, his vision card coming out this week, which you should pull anyway for mono fire, and he's going to say that again in a second. Sorry for pausing on that screen cap before he was sitting. But no, and again, Secrets of the Heart's a very old card, and that's really it. I don't really think this is much of an investment as it's making out to be. Now, many people might be strapped for Vizio at the moment, given what we've had recently for some things that have come out. Obviously, people that are saving for the 3rd anniversary. So I do think there's something to be said for that. But this being a limited time collaboration means either get it now or you never get it, which is why I lean toward yes, you should get it. And I'll stop there. There's a couple other points he makes, but I was flabbergasted that the verdict was a no for the majority of players. So let's look at the kit overall now. So the passive abilities. Wrath is a very interesting one, where it's a conditional on him being less than 40% of his health pool, where he'll get reaction block rate of 50, but also get an additional 20% physical damage up as well. Good passive, maybe for min-maxing something, but not one I think you're probably going to use. Blade Soul is probably one of the better ones here. This is the attack 25%, the evasion rate of 12, also the defense decrease of 7% here. Evasion Arts is another exceptional one that you'll probably have in the majority of the time. It's the missile and magical evade of 25 and the agility of 12%. Now, Trick Lancer Lore is where he gets his defense penetration of 40 from, while also increasing his crit rate of 25. Now, Trick Lancer Lore is a very important ability from the perspective of defense penetration 40. Up to this point, to date, all characters, if you had 40 penetration on a passive, you always have that equipped. Psaro's kind of bucking the trend in that you actually may not. And I'm going to talk about why in just a couple slides here. I don't think it's a bad passive, but I actually do think Blade Soul and Evasion Arts are probably the two you're going to lean on most of the time. And Unwavering Javelier, that's kind of a niche for the Trick Lancer subjob. Probably not on most of the time. But this is one that's also going to get a 25% accuracy buff in the future. So though it might be a little misleading to present it now on Global, it is coming in the future. So I just want to talk about it as if it's going to be a thing. Now, the counter abilities, this is where you start looking at that defense penetration here, where Bane Sword Spirit is a really interesting counter ability that when you evade an attack, you will increase defense penetration by 20 for 3 turns, and your slash resistance penetration by 20 for 3 turns. This is obviously an excellent way to increase your damage output. Third Eye is another good one from the perspective that it increases the evasion rate of 10 for another 3 turns. But the problem I have with this one is that I'm fairly certain it does not stack one of his main buffs, which grants 25 evasion to himself and a teammate. That one being the higher of the two will supersede Third Eye. But Bane Sword Spirit is one of the ways that you can help get his defense penetration up. The other one is the 10 on a Truststone passive, and spoiler alert, the other 20 comes from his Vision card, which comes next week, which gives him another 20. So you can effectively make up for that 40 defense penetration passive by having this counter ability proc, which it will, because he's an evade unit, he's probably going to evade a lot of stuff, but also via the Vision card and the Truststone passive. Now, for the main job buffs, that evasion skills is actually his second priority. The first priority is the TMR. From what we can tell, this is the second ability he'd use in that rotation. It's an AoE that increases agility by 25% and evasion rate by 25 for himself and allies. Exceptionally strong evasion buff. The agility is fantastic for him, being one of the faster characters in the game. Indomitable Spirit is his courage ability, where he also gets 20 AP upon usage, and this is where he also gets the physical buff of an extra 20% damage dealt to all attacks. So this is an excellent offensive buff. Both of these lean into exactly what he wants to do. Now, from the offensive perspective, and I have these asterisks here of AP costs underneath the regular ones, it's because with his sword, there's a 15% AP reduction cost. So these abilities are really 15% cheaper. So these asterisks are what they truly cost. Now, if I also bring up the heights here, Falcon Slash is a great ability from the perspective that once you get toward the end of the battle and you use this on someone to decrease their accuracy to 25, their accuracy buffs will likely have worn off by that time. So it does help his evasion late in those fights. Discontinuum +1 is an excellent ability in that it's a typeless 165% defense break of 30, also an attack break of 43%, and decreasing healing power of 60 as well. Now that typeless damage scales 100% off his attack stat. I believe it's 40% off the dexterity and 50% off the agility, so it will bypass anybody that has slash resistance or fire resistance. Unit resistance will reduce this, but overall great ability in that it has that unique twist on it. Now Crimson Cuts, there's actually a slight mistake here on Mode of Calc where it's this like one single square. That's actually not it at all. So this Crimson Cuts, it's a 200% modifier, 30% extra hit chance. It actually looks like a knight chess piece, almost AoE, and it is an AoE ability. I don't know how the website got it screwed up that badly, but it's much more versatile than you might think at first glance. And then finally, Strike of Ruin is a break physical barrier for targets, AoE, meaning people that are having problems with Dark Lucia at the moment with that big AoE barrier. This will break that. It will also dispel Courage as well. Overall, some great blends here of both unit and AoE attacks with some decent utility on almost all of them. Now the main job, Subjob, Master of Monster Kind, Helm Splitter is an AoE slash apparel of 25%. Get another AoE ability, and Hatchet Man is a single target ability, which is really interesting. I need to do some extra math on this, but it essentially reduces your hit chance by 150%, but it's basically a guaranteed critical hit for a 240% modifier, exceptionally high modifier, but obviously not something you use against evade units. But I want to do some damage calcs on this. It actually could be better than I think it is. Now, the Samurai Subjob, this is actually not a bad Subjob either. I think the two that are really interesting is Hien here, where it is going to be one of his lower priority abilities because of the modifier, but should he use it late in the battle, you can actually recover some AP if you kill someone with it, so I do like that as an X factor. But Illusion, I actually really like as well. You know, we type up his main job buff of the 25 evade and the agility buff, but this one is equally good for a different reason, that it's the 25 evade, but also AoE resistance of 15. So you could actually play with either of those depending upon the Psaro build and the teammate buff that you want to give. I love that versatility on the Samurai Subjob. The other ones are good. I just know how often you're going to use them. Which brings us finally to Trick Lancer. Again, kind of a niche Subjob. Fire at one point may have had the support to really lean into the Pierce side of things. And to be fair, I actually do think Trick Lancer is a job you might have equipped more often than not. Him is as well. There's enough negative Pierce resistance in the game that you can take advantage of those weaknesses, and it's good to give him, you know, a third attack type between the slash, the typeless, and now Pierce as well. But I would be kind of selective with what I have turned on. I wouldn't want Binding Javelin to be here because it's his longest range. I think there are other things that are more important for him to use. But I think some of these shorter ones like Cross Break and AP Break Lance, given how short range they are and the utility they have on them, I actually don't think there's necessarily a bad choice there. Now we get into the Limit Break and Mastery ability. This is a great Limit Break. Again, Fire does not have a lot of active Dispel as an element, so this dispels all buffs, haste. It's also a 240% modifier. That's exceptionally high for a Limit Break. Most of them are at 200. And obviously there's some great range on this. Really great Limit Break for what it adds to the fight. Now from a Mastery perspective, they've also given him an innate slash attack resistance penetration of 15 and acquired AP of 30%. So you're already seeing how good some of his AP management can potentially be. Now we get into the TMR review. This is a really good TMR. It's not a really great TMR. The immediate thing that's a demerit against it is that it is only single cast. Most modern TMRs are double cast. It's unfortunate this one's not, but statistically speaking as a cloth, this actually is a good cloth, and then it's got the 5 defense spirit, the 3 agility, and the 15 evade. It's pieces of cloth like this that actually go really well with some of those evade trust stone sets, depending upon how you want to build your character, putting a cloth in the TMR slot, whatever you have as the accessory. But from an ability perspective, it actually is still a good ability. Haste obviously is an exceptionally strong. The problem is that there are more and more haste dispels in the current state of the game, so this may not be as oppressive as it once was, but the decreased chance of being target of 6, also a very big thing for his overall survivability and mitigating what kind of attacks he takes. And again, this is not just for him, this could be for any character. This obviously could be an exceptionally good one for many evade units. So, very good TMR. I just wouldn't say it's an exceptionally good TMR. It's not the kind of TMR I would say you have to pull the character for so you can get it. Now, my general thoughts overall. You know, really creative character kit. He's super unique passives to tinker with, as we saw, between the physical buff, the evasion builds, the defense penetration, a lot of different things you can do there. Intriguing defense break that it's typeless and has the 60 healing power down. He's got some unique damage increasing buffs like the 20% extra on the courage. The modifier variety where the limit break is 240. He's got another one that we saw in the Subjob that's 240. A couple 200 on the main. The samurai, if you look at what those are, have a variety of different modifiers there as well, which is certainly unique. And then he's got creative penetrations here, where the slash resistance penetration perspective, he's got 15 on the mastery ability, 20 if you proc his counter ability, and another 20 on his sword. So overall, good penetrations there. And then defense, you could go the 40 on the passive, 20 on the counter, 20 on the vision card, and in the future, Dark Ifrit vision card is 25 defense penetration to the party. So again, a lot of really creative ways that you can build him to still achieve the kind of damage output that you want. Now, really interesting evasion levels, depending upon the attack types, the passives, the buffs, which is a good thing, because theoretically, if people know how evasive he can get, they might max their accuracy to levels to hit that. But if you're playing with a slightly less evasive build to give him more bulk or more damage output, then you'll catch them off guard because they're not geared properly to take that kind of damage. Also has a 25 evade on 2 different buffs, with either an agility percentage buff or the AoE resistance. You have really unique combinations there. He has good effective HP for an evade unit. His 13% on his own vision card too certainly helps his bulk overall. He brings back a strong slash synergy to fire, which used to be there, but less so now. Valentine Dyra was one of the more recent ones that is still slash. Tara technically as well, but Tara just hasn't fared well with how the game has gone. But he's also got the 25% Imperil on the Subjob, so it works well with Mon, Ildira, and then Yuffie in the future. And then also great AP consumption management, where as we saw, 30% acquired AP on his mastery ability. The Courage grants another 20 AP in addition to the 14 that you get from the TP conversion. The Sword is AP consumption down to 15%. So overall, really great things that you don't have to rely on bells or something to that effect to buff, where you can let him use his buffs in his kit and he'll still do his job just fine. Now, looking at some of the vision cards that his unique main job does apply to, because obviously this is a kind of a new mechanic in the game, Master of Monsters Kind is considered Sword as a warrior, which to date, right now, we have actually not gotten any of them in Global, at least from a UR perspective. But coming next week is the Slime vision card. Honestly, not one you're probably going to use very often, at least with the fire comp here. The Human Killer with physical attack, magic resistance of 16%, strike resistance of 20%. I'm not saying never, but this isn't a really noteworthy one. But the Yuffie card in the future absolutely is, where for the party, it's acquired AP of 60%, crit damage 20, and evasion rate of 20. This does apply to him. So definitely something to look out for in the future. Now, Esper Synergies, nodes that you want to emphasize are the fire attack nodes. Human Killer, not for fellow Psaros, remember he's not a human type, but for 99% of the other units. Slash attack, obviously, and then evasion and resist where appropriate. Now, obviously, Chaos Odin and Odin are the de facto best. Chaos Odin, in my opinion, is the best one by a lot. It's not even close. Some other good alternatives, though. Glacial actually might be my second favorite one here, with regular Odin being my third favorite. I love Glacial for the luck percentage nodes, as well as the slash attack and the missile resistance that's there. Ones that are less optimal, but still not bad. Demon Shimmer at least has the slash attack nodes as well as the evasion, but stat-wise not as great. And Tetrasylphid really doesn't offer anything other than the extra 25 evasion, so that's farthest on the totem pole down. But really, it's basically concentrated around these Espers. There's really not a ton others, unless you're specifically gearing for a bunch of a certain kind of elemental resist. Otherwise, pretty safe with the Chaos Odin or the Glacial Esper. Now, weapon optimization, it's Psaro's sword, and that's it. This sword, there's a reason why it's called Psaro's sword and not like, I don't know, Sword of the Flames or something like that. It's because it's literally made exactly for him. I personally love the assault build. The critical build is another close favorite though. He does have some good potential to get a lot of critical hits in, at least when you're gearing for the passive, or if you are going for the Phoenix vision card, which is a dexterity buff to fire. And maybe not now, but when you see that Yuffie card come out with the crit damage that's up, that's probably a build you want to look at a little closer. So for now, assault's probably fine, but the conditions on this, again, as I mentioned earlier, slash attack resistance penetration 20, AP consumption decrease of 15%, luck 15%, which exceeds what you can get on the Truststone passive, which is normally 10%, and slash attack of 15. This sword is exceptionally good for him and absolutely changes his entire character. You must farm for this and equip it on him. It's by far the best thing you can do. But that's the Psaro view in a nutshell. This is an excellent character who's going to thrive in the next couple of weeks against the ice meta. He will still have a place in the future when it goes through the reincarnation system as we get Yuffie and the game evolves just a little bit. At a minimum, the vision card is a must pull. Fire is starving for vision cards, and it's the best one in their class currently. And overall, I think he has a lot to offer that people are going to have a lot of fun playing with in building him for Guild Wars and other kinds of PvP content. But that's it for now. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I'll talk to y'all soon.